Today we have Patricia Bailey, the Vice President and Director of Entertainment and New Media Development, and she will give us a presentation on the digital gaming program.
Yes,
Welcome.
great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for allowing me to present on the New York State Digital Game Development Tax Program this morning. I will go ahead and start off with giving you all a quick overview of introducing the team. I'll also go over some background on the digital game development industry. I'll provide some more information on the digital game development tax credit. And I'll also let you know about the outreach we've been doing since this tax credit came to be, and give a quick overview of the applications we've received so far. And then I'll open the floor up for questions. So first, I'd like to introduce the team behind the digital game tax credit. We are led by Rhoda Glickman, who is here with us today. She is the Senior VP of the Film, Arts, and New Media Development. Myself, we also have Shaylin Giampetroni, who is also here with us today. She is the Senior Project Manager of the Strategic Planning Partnerships Program, Film, Tech, and New Media. We also work with Connie McFeely, Director of Entertainment Tax Incentives, and of course, John Diaz, Deputy Director of Entertainment Tax Incentives. So a bit of industry background. This is a growth industry. Back in 2020, it was estimated to be $196.9 billion industry worldwide. And PwC estimates that the global worth of this industry will be $321 billion by 2026. And according to the Entertainment Software Association, ESA for short, this is the primary digital game development advocacy organization in the U.S. The direct industry output in the U.S. was $40.9 billion in 2020. This same impact report placed New York State at number 4th in the nation with an estimated economic output of $976.4 million in 2020. Just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective, California came in at number 1 with over half of that $40 billion at $22 billion, followed by Washington State at $5.6 billion and Texas at $1.7 billion. Their 2020 report also identified in New York State 94 publishers, developers, or hardware state companies. Our team is currently working on updating that information because we feel it's a bit dated. The report also identified 23 higher education programs, including 2 of the top programs in the nation at NYU and RIT. So, what is the purpose of this New York State digital game tax credit? So we've been engaged with the industry for many years. And one thing that they've always been addressing to us is that they feel like what the state really needs to kind of that inflection point for the ecosystem was an as-of-right tax credit to help the industry really take off. I'll cover this a little bit more later in the presentation, but this particular tax credit really is designed to increase the investment in digital game development in the state and support the state's existing ecosystem. So a history on this tax credit. It passed last year in the 2022 budget. In the spring and summer of last year, the ESD team connected with industry contacts and conducted interviews to draft the regulations and the guidelines. In the fall of 2022, the draft regulations were open for public comment. In November 2022, the initial application opened. In December 2022, the official regulations were finalized. And in January 2023, the program fully launched. So we are now just over 4 months into this program. So what is the basic structure of this digital game tax credit program? It is a 25% tax credit on all qualified production costs in New York City. Outside of New York City, that percentage jumps to 35%. There is a maximum qualified costs of $4 million may be used for the calculation of the digital game tax credit. So, for example, if the project, if the project is over $4 million in New York City, they would be receiving $1 million in tax credit. Outside of New York City, they would be receiving $1.4 million in tax credit. And there is also a minimum spend of $100,000 on total production costs. So qualified costs, we define them as digital gaming media production costs incurred and paid within New York State directly and predominantly related to the creation, production, or modification of a qualified digital gaming media production. So think more in lines of the actual coding of the game, game design, animation, 3D arts, etc. What we are excluding are roles like human resources, marketing, and sales. I'd also like to add that these costs include up to $100,000 in wages and salaries for individuals other than actors and writers. We are also excluding that talent, who are either directly employed by the applicant entity and the project or employed by third-party vendors providing services for the project. Bless you. So application requirements, just a really quick rundown of what we require. It's pretty much in line with most of ESD's tax credits. We do require contact information, company information, including number of employees. The project information, we do want to know what sort of platform these games are running on. Is this a mobile device? Is this going to be on some sort of PC or a console? We also want an estimation of the production costs and the qualified costs, the start and end date of the project, a description of the game, and a percentage of the qualified costs that will be spent in New York State. We also request an estimated employment summary and a diversity plan, which I'll follow up with more information. We also request that they agree to in-credit requirements, which is the logo, which I'll also refer to later. We have questions on related persons, economic incentives that they have already received from New York State, project funding, publisher information, FOIL acknowledgement, and we do ask that they provide us with a game design document. And finally, we do ask that they provide signature. So the diversity plan, this is required on the application. All applicants must complete this plan, and through this, the company must consider how their employment strategy will look for this particular project. That's to say, will they be making any sort of attempt at employing underrepresented talent in this project? So applications are received in two parts. There's the initial application. So this is submitted before the application starts, and a final application, which is submitted after the project is complete. The initial application is received on a rolling basis. The application review process right now is actually pretty I think right now, because the applications are so new, we're talking with every applicant as they come in. The program staff sets up an initial call meeting once we've received an application. And, we're really kind of just discussing not only if they have any questions, but to also kind of have a better feeling for any issues they had with the application, and also for us to fully understand the project. And this has so far been great because it's also been giving us a lot of great feedback on the application itself and how, they feel about the tax credit. Applicants will be notified of their eligibility within 90 days of submitting their application. And if they, require it, we can also, once they've been accepted, we can provide them with a certificate of conditional eligibility. The final application is submitted after their project is complete, and with different games, this varies. It could be within 6 months, it could be within 3 years. But this application is submitted via the same portal that they submitted their initial application. The questions are mainly, confirmation of what they initially put in the first application. So basically, their estimates are now becoming actual spent. And once this is approved, the applicant will receive the certification of tax credit. So the ESD team has been promoting this program through a variety of outlets, from meetings with stakeholders, press releases, trade shows, panels, networking events, promotions, webinars, pretty much, the whole gamut. We've been doing what we can to get the word out. So pictured above is the Game Developers Conference, GDC for short, which we hosted a New York State Pavilion at last month. It had great success, and as you can see, we had a lot of attendance and interest. I've also pictured there a panel that I did earlier in January, in Troy to promote the digital game tax credit. So you might all be wondering what the heck is on your desk. This is the New York State logo. This logo was created by ESD Marketing. I'd like to give a shout out to Mark Hamilton, who really did a great job with its design. And so this logo serves two purposes. It's to help certify the project by being placed within a game and or the game's packaging. So this thing will be this is a logo that should be easily findable within any game that receives the digital game tax credit. But as you also see, so I've put not only this palm card, which will give you direct access to the application itself, but also this pin that we've been using and been very popular, especially at the Game Developers Conference, to help really get the word out and people are interested in what New York State is doing. So as you'll see with this pin as well, it's not just a logo to certify people who've been part of the digital game conference, of the digital game tax credit, but it's also a really great tool just to promote New York State in general and the digital game industry that is currently producing a lot of great things here in the state. So kind of a brief overview of what we've received so far in the past 4 months. This has been pretty strong. So far, we've accepted 5 applications. We've actually received nearly 20, which a few are still in process. Some have not been accepted, but right now we have 5 accepted, and all the applications are really well represented throughout the state. Interestingly enough, most of these applications have been coming from the Capital Region. Followed by New York State and also the Finger Lakes. So with that said, I'd love to open up to any questions anyone might have about this industry or the tax credit.
Right. Well, thank you, Patricia. Having 2 sons and having spent a small fortune on video games over the last 20 years, it's great to see that some of it is being homegrown here in New York. If you said it, I missed it. Do we have a handle on how many different gaming companies there are in New York, how many people they employ, and is there a part of the state where there is a sort of a concentration of them?
Yeah, so the ESA report said about 94 in their 2020 report. We think it's pretty stale, so we're actually going through right now to get a better idea. We did meet a lot of them through our promotion of the GDC Pavilion, but I think there's many more out there. A digital game company can be just one person, so it's really kind of hard to pinpoint, but we definitely think there's more than 94. Great question on the concentration. We do have a really strong ecosystem up in the Troy, Albany area. That's actually, like I said, where most of the applications are coming from. New York City and then the Finger Lakes, especially Rochester, are also a great concentration of digital games. That also happens to be where the NISTAR Centers of Excellence are for digital game development. So, we also work well with those groups to really help promote and get, more interaction with a lot of these studios that are existing. And in terms of numbers of employees, we don't have a strong number on that yet. We're going to go ahead and start working on that as well when we get a better sense of like the sizes of the studios that do exist. But I think that, the economic output at least is kind of the best indicator to kind of get a feel for that. And I think, as I said before, we're just under about $1 billion in that.
2 more questions. Any of our SUNY or CUNY schools or private universities have video game design programs or certificates?
Yeah. SUNY has a lot of programs. We actually had SUNY Poly attend the Pavilion with us. They have a really strong digital gaming program. I know there's others. They're actually also currently listed on the ESA website, but these programs are developing all the time. So I'm sure there's more that they haven't captured. CUNY actually just in partnership with the city released another program. I think Hofstra has something in partnership with them, so you can start at CUNY and then go to Hofstra. Might need to get a bit more certification on that, but the city is also really working hard on getting digital game development education going.
Great. Sherry, did you have a question?
So this is a purely political question, but people worry about these digital games, right? That they promote violence or whatever. Do you in your review of the game, do you look at that at all? I'm always worried that somebody will say this violent game, which caused somebody to do some terrible thing, was actually funded by
So
ESD.
that is an argument that, definitely ESA has been, addressing directly for a long time. But funny enough, most of the digital game growth has nothing to do with the kind of quote unquote violent games that you see. The growth is actually happening in mobile, and many of these games like Candy Crush
Right.
or like Farmers or
Yeah,
whatnot,
no.
that is actually where the growth is. But the actual like the I think the first person shooter type games, that really is, while it does exist within the industry, you can kind of see it more in the lens of any sort of entertainment, music, film. There are violent aspects of that, but within digital gaming development, because most of the growth really isn't happening specifically on that, and most of the people who are using digital games are more skewed to the older crowd. Maybe it's just they grew up with games and, more or less my age now, playing on their phones. But really, we are seeing kind of like that pivot from that concern to more of actually it's becoming just ubiquitous in our society.
Great question, Sherry, and a great answer. Interesting. Anybody else have any questions? In terms, when you said New York is fourth, do the other, California, Washington, and Texas, do they have tax credit programs too? And how does our tax credit compare to theirs?
So interestingly enough, no, they don't. Texas does. They actually have it folded in within their film tax credit, and it's a little bit strange in the sense that it's not. It's because the state doesn't have tax credits. It's kind of more of a refundable sort of program. So I hesitate to call it a tax credit program. It's kind of different in that sense. And that is one of the reasons why it moved and kind of surpassed us to number 3. The story with California and Washington State, and California it's almost ridiculous how large it is. That's mainly because those are legacy industries. A lot of digital game developments began as offshoots of defense, right? So often if pilots were being trained on simulations, that then that talent was able to spin off and start their own digital game companies in the 70s and 80s. Then you had companies like Nintendo basing themselves in Redmond in Washington State. So those kind of ecosystems started off and have just been growing for the past 4 decades on their own. Because of that, California and Washington State really have no need to move forward with a tax credit.
Right.
New York State, on the other hand, I think really has this kind of great ecosystem with the education and a lot of talent here that ends up being drawn over to the West Coast. So this tax credit is, I believe was put together basically to make sure that we retain that talent and have them really start considering growing here in New York State.
Right. All right. Anybody else? Good. Thank you, Patricia, for a terrific presentation. Again, every month we learn about something very cool that we're doing that most people have no idea that we're doing. And so it's helping to attract and retain jobs, and that's always a good thing.
Yep.
So thank you for that.
Right. Thank you so much.